we just live our everyday lives without even knowing that we're reinforcing a social hierarchical structure that's been in place for 400 years. Caste argues that the US operates under a hidden caste system. It is an entrenched hierarchy that assigns value based on race, with Black Americans historically positioned at the bottom.
We're also a victim of this system that is keeping the untouchables in their place. Black women at the same economic status and education that I am is twice as likely than I am to die giving birth. We are part of that dominant class. Even though we are trying not to actively participate in it, we are still perpetuating the system. If we don't shed light on this system, we can't do anything to change it. Welcome to As the World Burns,
a podcast about books and conversation with the world that we are currently living through, which is kind of a mess.
This is Mel.
And across from me is Jamie.
We are two friends that are trying to keep our sanity in the current political climate.
We're also bookworms, and we decided that it would be a great idea to take some of the books that we're reading and connect the dots to the news of the day and the current events and things that are happening around us. So if you missed episode 1, we will link it in our show notes, but we had a discussion on a book called How Democracies Die, and it was kind of a rocky start, but I think we did okay. And we also have just published a follow-up to that episode. Today, we are going to be discussing the book Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. So you can see that Jamie and I have heavily marked up our copies if you're watching us. I'm just going to jump into it. This is going to be a really heavy episode. This book, when we both read it independently before we ever decided to do a podcast. It was eye-opening for me, having not grown up in this country. I know for Jamie, it sat with her in a different way as well. And we're going to get into all of that, but we want to tell you guys, our listeners, our viewers, that we are approaching this conversation in good faith. However, please know that we fully are aware that we will stumble, probably say something incorrect, maybe spark some outrage. The intent here is to not get canceled, not hide from the difficult conversations, but be brave enough to discuss things without making it about us necessarily. We need to recognize what has been happening in our country. There's a great quote from the book. It's on page 43 if you happen to have this particular copy. Wilkerson writes, the country cannot become whole Wilkerson writes, the country cannot become whole until it confronts what was not a chapter in its history, but the basics of its economic and social order. She also writes on page 17, ignorance is not protection from the consequences of inaction. So for us, we don't want to ignore what's uncomfortable. We don't want to stay away from something that may or may not spark outrage. We want to have this discussion. We are also very, very aware that we cannot possibly discuss every single issue that has come up. If you could see the amount of highlights I have in here, and I know Jamie has the same in this book, we've chosen some talking points that we would like to go through, some examples that sort of demonstrate what in our current state of affairs back up what Wilkerson writes in this book. We don't think this is going to be the only episode where we talk about this.
I think that to follow up on what Melissa was saying, when we were discussing whether or not we were even going to discuss this book as two middle-class white women who have no lived experience in racism, what stopped me from shying away from it is the book itself, right? Wilkerson saying that silence is the problem. Wilkerson saying that in order to change this system, we have to have these hard discussions. And the whole premise of the book is that this system is interwoven into the fibers of who we are as human beings. And while it's easy to say, as a middle class white woman, I'm going to try and do better, and I'm going to try to uncover my internalized racism and get over it. That's a cop out, right? That's not a real discussion. The real discussion is putting ourselves in these uncomfortable situations and understanding the system that we benefit from as white women, that we're actively benefiting from a system that oppresses an entire group of people, and understanding that has shaped how we behave, and that's shaped how we think, and that's shaped how we see the world. And through this discussion, we may uncover uncomfortable truths about ourselves and explore those truths. But that's kind of the point that Wilkerson is making, is if we don't shed light on this system, we can't do anything to change it, right? If we don't shed light on where we are promoting the system, we can't change it either. And so while we're going to do everything we can to be as what is the word I'm looking for, Melissa?
Conscious?
Yes, as conscious
Yeah.
of that as possible.
Yeah.
I think it's important to have these hard discussions and expose ourselves, and not let fear of being canceled, as Melissa said, stop us from having these conversations and exposing these systems, even when we're promoting them subconsciously or consciously.
Yeah. So I think our goal with this discussion on this book, whether it be one episode or more, is twofold. Number one, I think we really want to show everyone else who has not had an opportunity to read this book, just how systemic racism and the caste system of this country is, how ingrained it is in our society, how it's invisible and how we're not even aware of it. So we're trying to sort of pull that out and show people. I didn't know. I did not grow up here. I actually grew up in a country where there is an informal caste system as well. So I'm seeing a lot of parallels, but that system is not disguised as racism. But the second thing that we're hoping for, aside from building some awareness and education for people who are not familiar with this topic, is starting a dialogue and starting a discussion.
And I think the whole point of the book, again, but also having this discussion, is to try and more readily recognize the patterns that support our caste system in America, that in turn supports racism in America.
So let's get into it. The book. Let's talk about the book. So I have some notes here. I'd like to read them specifically so I can articulate correctly. So Caste argues that the U.S. operates under a hidden caste system. It is an entrenched hierarchy that assigns value based on race, with Black Americans historically positioned at the bottom. Comparisons that Wilkerson, who, by the way, is freaking brilliant, I just got to get that in there. What a wonderful writer.
Such an amazing, engaging writer.
Such an excellent writer. Yeah, absolutely.
And I want to say, I just want to throw in, I was living for all of her nerdy sci-fi interjections everywhere throughout the book. I was like, oh my God.
I noticed that too. So I know. It made her more like accessible as a human in my brain.
And it made
I feel like we could hang with her and have coffee. Also, Isabel Wilkerson, if you want to talk to a couple of super amateur podcasters about this, please come on our show.
Yes, come on our show. We would love to talk about your book.
We would love to talk to you. Yes. So, okay. So let's go back to this. So this is what caste is defined as in the book. Some examples of systems that Wilkerson provides are Nazi Germany, India, and the United States. And so India, I think we've generally heard of the caste system. It's very defined. It's very clear. Nazi Germany, of course, we've been educated on. The US isn't something that people generally look at. Um, why does this framing stand out so much? Well, because, again, I'm going to quote Wilkerson: caste is an infrastructure of our divisions, but it is an artificial construct. So, a fixed and embedded ranking of human value that sets the presumed supremacy of one group against the presumed inferiority of other groups. That's on page 17. I grew up in a society exactly like this, but it wasn't based on face color. It was based on societal rankings, if you will. Very, very similar patterns. So let's get into it. So we've got some discussion points we want to get into. So we've got naming the system. Every discussion point that we have for this particular episode has a quote from the book related to it. So for this one, which I think defines everything so beautifully, is caste is the bones, race is the skin. Jamie, let's talk about it.
Yeah. So what Wilkerson is basically arguing is that racism is the visible layer that we can see, whereas caste is the invisible layer that we are not always aware of, essentially. It's a really interesting point, and I think that this is the root of why this book has stuck with me, because this book I read it months ago, and I still think about it all the time. I think about this, like there are those books that just stay with you. This one stayed with me. And I think that this is probably at the root of why, because it's a really fascinating idea that there is this system that has been put into place that began 400 years ago, that has been so ingrained in the fabric of our society that, as I said at the beginning, it's interwoven into who we all are. And I think maybe I was thinking about this as you were talking about Turkey, is maybe that is a difference. You were not raised here. I was raised here. I've been here for
Yeah.
generations. So it's very much this system is interwoven into who I am as a human being, who my family is as a unit. And I think that that's a really interesting idea. Um, but also I found it very disconcerting, because I strive to, wherever possible, recognize my own internal racism and combat that. And I worry that looking at this from such an academic and almost anthropological perspective, um, is going to release us from
Responsibility.
responsibility. Thank you. Is going to release
You're
us
welcome.
from responsibility of participation in this system. And so because language matters and how we talk
It
about things
does.
matter.
It does. But I think to discuss the book, we do have to make sure that we draw that distinction that, Wilkerson argues that race is about identity, but caste is about power and hierarchy.
Well, and I think she does do a really good job in the book. Like as I'm having these
Hmm.
discussions, like these inner monologues with myself as I'm reading it, she does a really good job about maintaining that lived experience of racism as a manifestation of this underlying caste system. I think she does an excellent job of that. And
Yeah.
and I think that that's another thing that drew me so much to the book, because I think that she's right. She says it multiple times in the book that this gives us a place to, oh, hang on, where was it? Hang on. I know I haven't marked in one of my notes. Give me a sec.
Yeah, you're good.
She says I'm on page, I think this is it. Yeah, on page 70, she says, caste is
Okay.
insidious and therefore powerful because it is not hatred. It is not necessarily personal.
That makes me feel that's gross
Right. And so and I
because
think
we're talking about people. It should
I
be
it
personal.
should be personal. And I think that's where I'm so conflicted
Ugh,
with this book, and how
I know.
she jumps between the two concepts so easily. And one concept is very emotional, and it's very, very much a core part of many people's lived experiences. And the other part, she's setting it up to be very analytical. And I had a hard time. They just seemed like they were too incongruent looking at it in those two separate ways. I think she did a really good job jumping between the two, but I
Yeah.
still had a hard time with separating it like that. I think it was, I think it just made me, like you said, it just kind of feels icky. It doesn't feel,
Yeah.
I don't know, because it is
it doesn't feel
personal.
icky.
It,
Yeah, it doesn't feel icky because of her framing. I think it's her trying to educate the reader on sort of the history and the more analytical, the more academic aspect of things, so we have a better understanding of it. It does feel icky, but that's a visceral reaction. I don't feel icky because of, I don't think she was making it icky. I just think it was, God, I sound like a toddler. Icky, it's icky. But I think that she did it, like you said, did a very good job sort of bringing the academic anthropological viewpoint and her own perspective. I think that helped really provide the balance that a reader would need to not just assume that they were reading a memoir, for example, or something very subjective. I think that the way that she framed it gave it a really good objective
well, I think
perspective.
ultimately her point is that her point in saying that it's not hatred, it's not personal. I think that does give us an opportunity to have this really difficult conversation with people that when you talk about systemic racism and white supremacy and white
Yeah.
privilege, they immediately stop listening because they're like, Psh, that's not a real thing. Because that means I'm racist and I have white privilege and I grew up poor and I never got anything. And you can't tell them anything at that point because they stop
No.
listening. Whereas I think the way that she was phrasing it does, and framing this whole discussion, it has a lot of potential to open the discussion to people who otherwise would not be open to this discussion. And I think that she makes a good point. Like, do you remember the one story that
Yeah.
she was talking about with like the plumber or some of the racist,
Oh, yeah.
what was it? I don't remember, but
It
it was some, and they ended up like, it was kind of a weird story to throw in there.
he kind of came in a couple of times. She was
Yeah.
having issues with something,
Mhm.
and the plumber didn't seem to want to be there, take her
Yeah, yeah,
seriously,
yeah, yeah.
right? But he ended up coming back a couple times, and they started having a dialogue, if I remember correctly, and something about the topic of conversation, which is escaping me,
I can't
I
remember it
think
either. It just popped
made
in my head
it
as we were talking about
personal
it.
for him. Like
Right.
it had him look at her as a person as opposed to a Black woman
And then they were
who,
able to have discussions as human beings. And
as human
I
beings.
think that's a really wonderful sort of, not even byproduct, because I think that it's part of her purpose, right? Is to be able to
Yeah.
have discussions as human beings to shine light on this system that
Hmm.
is built on a cracked foundation. Um,
Yes. And so she's trying to shift that conversation to, separate. Like, we're not talking about one individual person, but we're talking about the structure of the system and what can we do? How can we live within this system and try to dismantle it?
and
So
she
that, yeah,
readily, sorry, I'm sorry, I keep
no, no, no,
interrupting,
no, do it. This
but
is this
she
is how we talk.
she readily admits that and this sort of, I think this sort of gives people like a, oh, it's not my fault. And again, that's both difficult for me to wrap my emotions around, and I see the
Hmm.
benefit of it. But she says multiple times that it's very difficult to combat this system because you're promoting the system even when you're not actively participating in it.
Yes.
And
It's
so,
part of our, it's become like oxygen. It's
right.
part of everything. You can't separate it out. Or, I mean, we can, but if we can talk about it, if we can at least educate one or two people and have them open their eyes a little bit, maybe have them read the book, join the discussion, maybe
Yeah,
that's a
I
start.
think that, I honestly, in my opinion, like this book hit so hard for me that I think that it should be mandatory reading in every high school. I think it should be mandatory, or
Well,
at least college.
this is a fantastic segue into our news tie-ins, because we did want to make sure that we were bringing in some current events that are related to these. It was a tad difficult to find clear connections with everything, because it wasn't like How Democracies Die, where there's like a checklist in terms of here is how an authoritarian regime behaves.
Now let's
This
see
we
how
had to
ours
dig.
is behaving.
Yeah. This one we have to dig a little deeper, because it's not just a checklist. Although there are some lists in the book. But in this case, we wanted to talk about more general concepts. And in this case, with regard to the system, is talking about race in general and educating the populace about race. And so we're seeing that there has been legislation and policy changes that are directly restricting how race and inequality can be taught in schools. There will be links in our show notes with these sources, but there's ongoing reporting from outlets such as the New York Times about teachers having to navigate laws that restrict what they can teach with regard to race. And in fact, these laws happened, like they were passed in California, of all flippin' places. They restrict divisive concept, like teaching divisive concepts, and teachers are actually self-censoring because they're afraid of repercussions. That's not how learning should be working. And let's not even, I mean, we have to talk about it. The Florida Individual Freedom Act, which is HB 7, aka the Stop Woke Act, WOKE Act, restricts what educators can say about race, racism, and the history of racism in the United States. They're trying to control the narrative, and that comes down to control, right? So,
Because again, how you speak about things and words matter. And they're trying to control the narrative so that they can control the population. And as we're going to discuss more, and as Wilkerson does a really good job, like normally, I'm sorry, tangent really quick. We said we're going to discuss these books so that you don't necessarily have to read them. Read this book.
Read this book. If you read one book,
so good. And
read this book.
And even if you're like, oh, I don't like nonfiction, it's dry. This is not dry. There is nothing
It's
about
really
this
good.
book that is dry. She is such an engaging writer. She's so funny. She is so relevant, and she's so well spoken that you're gonna love it. I promise you, it's not dry. Read this book.
No, it's not.
So
But you're right. It is about controlling the populace. It is about if you control what people can see and learn, you control their ability to see the system that is working behind the scenes, and the they that we keep referring to
the system.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yes, exactly.
Because you're giving people, and we did talk about this a little bit last time, but you're giving people an emotional target. And that emotional target happens to be the lower caste, and you're willing, because you're feeding into the system that you don't even know you're participating in, and you're operating by the rules of this system, that you're voting against your own self-interests, and you're
Well, that's the refrain for this country, but yes. Yeah. But truly, I mean, and we keep saying they. Who is they? This is the higher caste. And I mean, I don't want to keep using air quotes, but in the context of this book, the caste is sort of the top echelon of hierarchy and power. And that is basically white men. Of course, there are women in that as well. But generally, we're talking white men, the people who are in charge of this country, the people who want to make sure that anyone who is in a perceived, quote unquote, I did it again, lower caste should not succeed. Because what happens when that happens? It emboldens people from that lower caste and shows them that there are incredible things possible if they work hard enough. Look at their election of Barack Obama. People freaked out. The white people freaked out. Why? Because a black man was elected as the leader of the free world. Why does that threaten you?
Oh my God. Oh, hang on. Pause.
What?
Okay. Melissa, I've been talking to you about this book for years, but you saying that, oh my God,
The money one?
had a brain exploding emoji moment, right? So
Dark money.
10 years ago, I read this book. I've been telling Melissa to read this forever. We need
She
to talk
has,
about this
and
on the
it's
podcast.
in my pile. I'm pointing. It's back over there. It's in my pile.
Oh my God. So the whole premise of this book, if anyone out there has read it, it's Dark Money by Jane Mayer. And she's a journalist, and she delves into sort of the billionaire power brokers that are controlling US politics behind the scenes. And they saw Barack Obama being elected as the pretty much the worst thing that could possibly happen to them. But here's the thing. They're that dominant caste, right? Everyone in this book that they're talking about, in the inauguration of Barack Obama, there were millions that were gathering in DC, and across the country, there were a group of US of the most powerful people in the US meeting to talk about how they can make sure that this never happens again.
And look at where we are.
In light of caste, what a fascinating, they're operating within the caste system. Like they're being controlled by that same caste system, and they see that caste system deteriorating, and they're immediately doing what they can to make sure that it doesn't collapse. And
because they think a lower non-dominant caste person
is
becoming
now
powerful threatens them.
In the United States. And how can we let that happen? Because
how can we let that happen?
You can't be in a position of power if you're in, God, what is the lower, the people that are outside the caste system? Shit.
In India, I forget. Yeah.
Like untouchables or something like that, right?
Untouchables. Yeah.
Untouchables. Okay.
I think that's correct.
So, and an untouchable is coming into power as the most powerful person in the United States. That is not okay, right? So they're working within the same system. They're being controlled by the same system. And my mind just got blown, because that book is another one that has stayed with me for a decade.
And for those of you watching at home, this is how our brains work. I say something and Jamie has like a massive brain explosion. I love it.
God.
I love it. So, well, this is kind of a segue really into our next discussion point, which is the comfort of the top. So the quote here is, "A caste system depends on the willing acceptance of those at the top," right? So we were just talking about those people. So there's benefiting from systems and creating the systems. They're not the same, but they are kind of the same. It's one of those nebulous concepts that's kind of difficult to wrap your head around. We're all participating and benefiting from this system if we're seen to be of the dominant, the dominant caste. Just because we didn't create the system doesn't mean we're not benefiting from it. So it's something that we have to sit with, and we've mentioned this before, and it's going to keep coming up again. So yes, this is tricky and it's uncomfortable. There's no obvious sort of like Disney villain to place the blame on and send the heroes after with a quest to take them down so that everybody can exist in pure equality and peacefulness. We just live our everyday lives without even knowing that we're reinforcing a social hierarchical structure that's been in place for 400 years.
And going back to the challenges in education right now, and critical race theory, and how everyone is talking about how not everyone, but the dialogue always comes back to, I didn't have slaves. You want me to hate myself because someone 300 years ago had slaves? Not 300 years ago, but you know what I mean. But that wasn't me, and why should I hate myself for that? That's not what this discussion is about. It's not about hating ourselves. And again, I think Wilkerson highlights this really, really well. It's about having the discussion and understanding that you are benefiting from a system that you didn't create, but it's also hurting you. It's hurting you. You didn't create it, and you don't have control over it, because you're not willing to look at it. And if you never look at it, you're never going to take control of it. And so you're as much of it, I'm saying you, like we're as much of a,
The royal you. It's
yeah,
the
the
royal you.
royal you, exactly.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
also a victim of it, not as much of a victim, but you're also a victim of this system that is keeping the untouchables in their place, right?
So to speak.
So to
Yeah,
speak.
absolutely. Absolutely. And that, bringing in some current events, I know that, as a country, we've tried to address this by putting in some DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, which, of course, have been very loudly rolled back with forced legislation and threats. We talked a little bit about this in our first episode with How Democracy Dies as well. There's been reporting across the board, New York Times, Washington Post, companies are scaling back or rebranding their DEI efforts so they don't anger the government or anger, the dominant caste. But that is to the detriment of the people that those programs were meant to help. That was a way for us to sort of recognize that we do have an underlying hierarchical social structure that rewards people in power and oppresses people who don't have power. That those programs were, even if it was in a tiny way, designed to try to help people break free of that as much as possible. And what happens when the dominant caste gets their way and elects somebody like Donald Trump? They're able to force through rollback of these programs.
Yeah, unfortunately. And it again, it's hand in hand with affirmative action. I've been hearing my whole life
Yeah.
people bitching about affirmative action, right?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Because it somehow does the reverse of its intention, and it hurts white people, which again, come on.
That argument
It's
always makes
so
me stabby.
it makes me
It's
stabby too. I
such
can't stand it.
there's a lot of mental gymnastics that people have to perform to come to that freaking conclusion.
Right. And so it's the same thing with rolling back DEI initiatives and companies. So, and it was
Yeah.
really unfortunate when that started happening, because companies that I stupidly, because I should have fucking known better, because corporations are not looking out for anyone. Like Target,
No.
I just assumed that Target was like this
Oh,
inclusive company.
that one
They
hurt.
they immediately, like they couldn't
They rolled
roll
over.
back their DEI initiatives fast enough. They
Yeah.
immediately
And do
did
we
it.
shop at Target anymore?
We do not shop at
No,
Target
we do
anymore,
not.
because
We
the
do
little bit
not.
of power that we have is where we shop. So,
Well, if enough
um,
people demonstrate that power and choose to exercise that power, maybe they'll see that the people that
I
bring
don't know.
them those
I'm still waiting
profits,
for Chick-fil-A to
you
go out
know.
of business. I haven't gone to Chick-fil-A since I found out that
Oh,
they were funding conversion therapy.
conversion therapy.
And how
I
long ago
know.
was that? I'm still waiting for them to go out of business, but people love their fucking waffle
They
fries.
love this is true.
But going back to real life examples of this book, a really interesting topic is the health disparities between the castes.
Yeah, which
And
is our segment 3.
yeah, so
Body keeps the score.
that's right. Okay, let me get there.
There are like 16 quotes that I pulled out specifically related to this, but the one on the bottom that's bold, I think you need to read that one. That's the big one.
Caste can determine one's health, longevity, and well-being. I think,
Simple as that.
yeah. So there are statistics that are put out by the CDC of maternal mortality rates. And I actually have two different statistics. I have the CDC and I have commonwealthfund.org, because I liked one statistic that Commonwealth Fund brought in that CDC didn't.
Cool.
The numbers are different, but that's because Commonwealth Fund is pulling from 2020, CDC is pulling from 2024. And so the numbers
24.
are
Yeah.
different, but I'm going to start with CDC. So, the maternal mortality rate by race in the United States is shocking, because we're looking at women who died also postpartum, so up to 42 days after delivery. but not
Mm-hmm.
like from accidents or anything. It's specifically pregnancy related deaths. So it is tied specifically,
Infections
right?
or
It's tied
yeah.
specifically to the pregnancy, and they go by race. And they say, oh, so white women in 2024 had a mortality rate of 14.2 per 100,000 live births.
Okay.
Asians had 18.1 per 100,000
Mm-hmm.
live births. Hispanics had 12.1. And then we get to Black women.
Interesting.
Black women had 44.8.
That is an
An
astounding statistic.
astronomical jump. And the
Yeah.
reason that I wanted to bring in the Commonwealth Fund is because they separated out a little bit more. So they put in the US maternal mortality rate. And in 2020 it was 22.3 per 100,000 live births, right? That's all the women in the United States. If you separate out Black women from that and you only look at the white women, then you're at 19. And this was in 2020, so it's gone down a little. If you take out the white women from that statistic, that 22.3, and you just look
Yeah.
at Black women, it jumps up to almost 50, from 22
Oh
to
my
almost
God.
50. So all
That's
women
insane.
together and Black women by themselves, it more than doubles. That's, I can't even say shocking. Like, that's
Oh my
heart-wrenching. Like,
gosh.
that is a heart-wrenching statistic. What and Wilkerson talks about the health consequences of this caste system, and
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing it right now
Right here.
in these statistics.
Well, and I think as an additional sort of point of data here, the Kaiser Family Foundation has a report that talks about, because, you can say, oh, well, this is within the poorer population, economically challenged population. This gap, this maternal mortality gap based on race exists regardless of income or education,
Yep.
which makes it hard to explain. You can't explain it away by saying, well, these are economic standards. No, this is
No,
purely race.
this means, looking at these statistics, my brain, the way I interpret this, is a Black woman at the same economic status and education that I am is
Mm-hmm.
twice as likely than I am to die giving birth.
Yeah, more than twice
More than
at this
twice.
point. This is insane. So, but what is it? Like, what is it within the healthcare system that reveals that inequality? Like, why is it that disparate? Did I say that right? Why is it, why does it swing so wildly between races?
So part of the point that Wilkerson talks about in her book is that there is a physical toll of being part of this caste system. And another, and I think that we see it in that lower caste, right? The untouchable caste, which she equates the untouchable caste with India with the Black caste in the United States. And I mean, that statistic said it more clearly than anything else could, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also, NAACP is talking about uh, police shootings, fatal police shootings, and how it's
Mm-hmm.
disproportionately Black people that are being shot by police. And like there's that aspect of
Yeah.
it. There are stories, I'm sure you've heard them too, of just medical professionals
Mm-hmm.
treating Black women specifically Black women,
Black women. Mm-hmm.
like they're somehow less than human and more animalistic. And so they don't give them the same level of care, which is,
Exactly.
how are you a fucking medical professional if,
Not,
anyways,
you're not living up to your oath.
you're
No, I
not living
completely
up
agree
to
with
your
you.
oath?
And
How can
in
you
fact,
treat someone so differently that they're twice as likely to die
that they're
in
twice as likely to
childbirth?
die.
That's
Exactly. Well, they
insane.
don't see these professionals, especially if they're of the dominant caste, do not see anyone but their own caste as, subconsciously, consciously, whatever, as human. I think it was in this book, but I've read similar passages in several books I've come across recently, talking about the experiments that were performed on Black women. Be, you know, specifically gynecological procedures conducted on these women with no anesthesia, no
No
pre or
consent.
post-op care, no consent. These women had no idea what was being done to them. You think back to Henrietta Lacks. Have you read The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks? Like they took, yeah, I mean, that's the most, I think, well-known case of her cells being taken, cancerous cells being taken from her cervix without her consent and being used and still being used in laboratories globally. The HeLa cells are a part of a chemist's daily life. My sister is a chemist and she's used HeLa cells, and she had no idea what they were or who they came from or what the story was until many years later when she read the book, and she's actually the one who recommended that book to me. But that's just a small example of what happened, what has happened to these women, and it still continues today.
And
We all know
talking
what
about
happens.
unconsciously
Yeah,
benefiting from those things, a lot of female health
right
that we
there
have now
is
is
thanks to the
because
HeLa
of
cells
those
and those
things. Yeah.
experiments. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
it, which again is a horrifying thing to think about, but it's something that we need to, shed light on. It's something that we need to talk about so that we can understand why there is such a disparity between healthcare and life expectancy between Black Americans and white Americans.
Hmm.
Whereas Wilkerson says the dominant caste and the lower caste,
Lower caste.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Which is synonymous with, what we're saying at this point. It really, I mean, this is, I think we could have an entire episode just talking about this. For now, we have to move on, but I do hope that anybody who is listening to this particular segment, if you come away with anything, I would love if you were to research that particular aspect of things, the disparity in the healthcare systems. Um, Moving on to our next point is we're talking about control and policy. So again, these are all interwoven. These are not standalone points. They're all very related to each other. This particular one, the quote that stood out was, "Caste is about power. Which groups have it and which groups don't?" So that is kind of about everything. Policy is created so that the people who are in power, the dominant caste that is in power, can structure things as they want to and enforce things as they want to in order to keep themselves in power. It's a bit like an authoritarian regime, is it not?
A bit, yeah. And
Hmm.
using those, I guess, silent or unseen structures to define who's worthy and
Yeah.
having policy reinforce that.
I just have to say it just still makes it I have a hard time, very hard time with the concept of one human being determining the worthiness of another human being to either exist, be in pain, not be in
100%.
pain. How are we like we can't
And
answer this question, but it's disgusting.
it's disgusting. And she talks a lot about how slavery has happened in other places, but never like it did in the United States.
Never like it
Never
did.
like it did here. And one thing that I never really thought about until I read this book, and I'm probably going to butcher this because it's been a while, but she said Europeans didn't have an understanding of whiteness until they came
Yes,
here, right?
correct. She
So
did say
like,
that.
and it almost came out of necessity, this caste system that began with Black slavery in the United States, because the indigenous people, they got sick and they died, right?
Hmm.
Europeans, they could run away and you couldn't tell who they were, right? They could blend in with the dominant caste. And so
Right.
that didn't work. But what did work was bringing in Black people. And the only way a system like that endures is by dehumanizing them, right?
Yep.
So in the book, it talked about how people would come and look at the U.S. slavery system and say, like, Jesus, not Jesus, because, this was the 1600s.
But Jesus,
But Jesus,
Jesus.
you treat your horse better than you treat your slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And you could literally do anything you wanted. And I think
Because they were property.
Wilkerson jumps around a lot in the timeline of the United States. She jumps between her experiences. She jumps between historical experiences. But actually, I think that that's intentional, her doing that, because or at least I read it that way. And that's how I was taking it as I was reading all of this, because we look at slavery as so long ago. And we are looking at us as we're moving toward this post-racial world, right? That I think that's why Obama's presidency gave us so much hope, because we're like, oh my God,
much hope.
Are we finally here? Only to have it ripped away from us, right? Because the caste system was challenged. And I think she jumps around so much that way in the book between her experiences and historical experiences and current events, because she wants to give the impression that this is not as far away as we like to think. This is happening now.
It's just happening in a different form. It's not as
just
overt.
In a different form. It's slavery in a different form.
Absolutely.
In a more socially acceptable form.
On that note, let's continue to wallow in our pit of despair. It actually brings up the next point. This is a good segue to the next point. Silence and avoidance. So the next two discussion points that we want to bring up are less news related and more sort of personal anecdote related. But from the book, the quote for this one is, "Silence is the refuge of those who benefit from the system." So we've talked about it. We've come back to it several times.
Yeah.
If you're uncomfortable about something, you're going to avoid it.
Yep.
If you don't want to bring up something because you don't like change, you're going to avoid it. What we're trying to do is not perpetuate that silence. Maybe we're doing it wrong. Maybe we're missing the point entirely, but we are not being silent. We are starting a discussion. So that's what we're trying to do. You need to learn how to sit in that discomfort and grow from it.
And see where you need to work personally, but also where you need to put boots on the ground and actually do the work in society. Because too often, because racism isn't our lived experience, it's easy. So this goes back to why, after we asked a person of color to be on the podcast, and she completely validly said, this topic is too heavy for me, right? It's too often we rely on Black people, and specifically for some weird reason that I can't fathom, Black women. Like Kamala Harris's whole campaign was propelled by Black women that were like, yes, let's get this done. And we don't do the work that's needed because we are afraid of getting it wrong, or we're afraid of saying the wrong thing, or we're afraid of offending someone, but our silence reinforces the system that we're benefiting from. So
that's exactly right.
We're to blame for perpetuating a damaged system by remaining silent and by not doing the work that's needed to dismantle the whole thing.
I agree, but I just want to say, one of the reasons that it is not easy. Now, I'm not saying it has to be easy, but one of the reasons that people maybe shy away from these discussions is because of some of the very harsh words that they're maybe met with when they do try, if they do try, or they see other people trying, if they get it wrong, or if they have expectations that they shouldn't. You mentioned, why is it left to, I think you had alluded to this, so tell me if I'm putting words in your mouth, but I have come across creators on social media who have said, just because I'm Black doesn't mean that I have to educate you. Agreed. Completely agree. However, I am trying to understand better. If not if I can't go to you, who do I ask? So I'm afraid. I'm going to put it right out there. I am afraid of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, going to somebody and getting yelled at. I have ADHD. I have rejection sensitive dysphoria. Like, I do not like getting yelled at. I do not like being criticized. But I am trying to lean into that discomfort so I can learn and do better and maybe bring awareness, try to change the system. I don't know. One person can't do that, but collectively, maybe we can. Could we ask for a little grace? Maybe it's asking too much, but I don't, I feel like, see, I just feel like I'm going to get yelled at because I'm
I don't
asking
know.
for grace. But
So here's I'm going to challenge what you're saying and maybe rephrase it a little, because we
yeah.
are going to get it wrong. Because again, re-emphasizing
Hmm.
the point, we are part of that dominant class, right? We're
Right.
benefiting from this system on the daily, and because of that, even though we are trying to not to actively participate in it, we are still perpetuating the system, right?
Yeah. Just
And
by living.
so just
Yeah.
by living. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
having this discussion, we are going to get things wrong. We're going to get things wrong, because as much as we try, and Melissa, I know you would never knowingly do anything or say anything that's racist, but there still may be something that's part of, again, these structures are interwoven into who we are as human beings. And
Hmm.
so there are things that I haven't examined that are racist about me. I'm 100% positive that that is a true statement.
Ditto.
And having these discussions doesn't mean we're not going to offend anyone. It doesn't mean we're never going to get it wrong. But if someone yells at us, if someone's upset with us or mad at us, it's how we react. So
Yeah.
I have a
Good
good
point.
I have a good anecdote about this. So I live on this little island in the South. I moved here about 15 years ago. I moved here from California. When I moved here, I started having discussions about this, about white privilege, and how two people that are dropped in the same economic environment, one is black and one is white, the white person is going to have more opportunities to advance than the black person in the same exact situation. And I had so many people talking about how exactly what I said at the beginning, like they've never experienced white privilege and they don't know what I'm talking about. And ultimately
Sure.
they accused me of going to college. Like, you went to
How
college.
dare
I
you?
was like, where
I mean,
the fuck did
for
I
those of
move?
you, yeah, no, for those of you who are not aware, which I think only people who know us are watching at this point, but I giggled when Jamie started telling this anecdote because I too used to live in this small southern
Ugh,
town,
yes.
and Goddess bless you for trying. You didn't know. You didn't know. We've
It
since
was
moved
it was
away and
it
live in a
was
very different
wild.
environment. And that discussion would have sparked some incredible conversation in my current social circle.
Yes.
It's
But
very different.
the opposite, I can react like he did, right? I can dip
Yeah.
on my heels and say, nope, that's not me. I don't know what you're talking about. I was just trying to do good. I was just trying to be better.
Yeah.
But again, like that's the easy path. So if
Right.
we say something wrong and you're mad, like get mad, yell at us, do it. Like you have every
Yeah.
fucking right to get mad and yell at us, because again, you have a lived experience that we don't have, right? You
Yeah.
have an understanding that we don't have, and you can be pissed that we got it wrong. That's completely fine. What I would challenge is that we take that to look at those systems and understand what we haven't seen yet, because there are things that we don't see, that we haven't
Oh,
examined,
100%.
and
No
we
way
have
we
to
can
keep
know.
like
Yeah.
that has to never end, like that part of this discussion. And I think again, she never gives a conclusive way to stop all of this, but I think that that's a big part of what Isabel Wilkerson is saying, is
Hmm.
we can never stop shining a light on this system. We can never ever ever stop. And so if we see things that we're perpetuating without realizing it, and someone is mad at us for it, we can say, no, that's not us. Or we can say,
Or,
holy fuck,
mhm.
like, how did I never see that? How did I never see in all of my 43 years? How have I never seen that?
And thank you
So,
for pointing it out so we can be aware of it and maybe
yes,
educate others. But
yeah.
yeah, please. I mean, I agree. As much as I don't like getting yelled at or criticized, do it. Tell
Yeah.
us. Tell us. Just, maybe try not to yell too much because I'll cry.
Don't yell at Melissa, yell at me.
No, it's fine. It's funny because I'm actually very like hard-headed and I don't cry, but oh man, I'm telling you, it's the rejection sensitive
Yeah.
dysphoria.
No,
I'm just
I
amused that
am
there's a
very
word for it.
anti-confrontation and I cry whenever anyone yells at me. So don't yell at me either. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh gosh. No, but yeah, I agree. We do need to have the discussions. And that I think we've kind of already covered our last point, which is the limits of this conversation. So the quote from the book is radical empathy means putting in the work to educate oneself. So I think we actually did both of those final points sort of together. But, you know, we have to have broader conversations, yes, but we also have to be very conscious of how heavy this is generally.
So
Jamie has a passage.
I do. I'm trying to remember exactly where it is. So if you want to fill
This is the
in
problem when you mark
silence.
up so
I
many bits of your
know.
book.
I'm like, I know I have it.
But can we just talk about how satisfying this is?
All right, here it is. So it says America is an old house. We can never declare the work over. Wind, flood, drought, and human upheavals batter a structure that is already fighting whatever flaws were left unattended in the original foundation. When you
Oh,
live in an old house, you may not want to go into the basement after a storm to see what the rains have wrought. Choose not to look, however, at your own peril. The owner of an old house knows that whatever you're ignoring will never go away. Whatever is lurking will fester. God, I'm getting emotional. I cry
yeah,
all
I
the
can
time. I'm the
see.
opposite of Melissa. Whatever is lurking will fester, whether you choose to look or not. Ignorance is no protection from the consequences of an action. Back to the quote that Melissa was
The
talking about
quote,
earlier.
yeah.
Whatever you're
Mm-hmm.
wishing away will gnaw at you until you gather the courage to face what you would rather not see. And yes, not one of us was here when this house was built. Our
Mm.
immediate ancestors may have had nothing to do with it. But here we are, the current occupants of a property with stress cracks and bowed walls and fissures built into the foundation. We are the heirs of whatever is right or wrong with it. We did not erect the uneven pillars or joists, but they are ours to deal with now.
Oh,
And God, I
chills.
loved that passage.
That's beautiful.
And that's what I'm talking about when I tell you you have to read this book. Like it's filled
Mm-hmm.
with gems like that. Like she is such a good writer. And she's
Yeah.
so good at taking this very volatile topic and making it non-confrontational, for lack of a better word. Like that's not the right word, but
I know what you're trying to say and I can't think of the word.
anyways, so this is a really great, like if you've never looked at the fissures in our foundation, right? If you've never thought about that because you're so preoccupied by I didn't do it, my ancestors weren't slave owners, we're all living in this broken house now, and
Mm-hmm.
we all have to deal with the consequences. And a really good step, like if you don't know where to start, a really good step, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast and you got this far, you've already taken a good first step, but a really good first step is reading this book,
Yeah.
right? So
Please read the book. It's
please
just so
read the
good.
book.
There's
It's
no
so
way that
good.
this discussion can cover everything. So we hope we at least gave you some food for thought. Before we leave you, though, because this was so heavy, but we do this every episode anyway, we need to escape from our pit of despair. This is our little segment where we share with you something that's uplifting, a book, a podcast, something. So, Jamie, what do you got this week?
All right. So have you ever read The Fall of the House of Usher? The Edgar Allan
No,
Poe? Oh,
no,
you
I need
should.
to.
You
I
should.
have so many books I need
It's
to read.
a short story. It's really easy to read. But
Okay.
this is like a retelling of it. It's What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. And this is a pen name, and I can't remember her actual name off the top of my head.
And I
Um,
saw recently like what her actual name was, and I've already forgotten it.
yeah. Anyways, it's really good because it expands on the story of the fall of the House of Usher, and it sort of like gets under your skin. I really like horror. This is a really good, like,
Ooh.
mind-bending horror. And it's an easy read. I read this in like a handful of hours. It's like 150
Yeah.
pages. Like, you can read
It
it
looks
in a
like a little
morning
book.
if you
We're
wanted
going to
to.
try it. We're going to try it. Well, and I will say the previous recommendation you gave, which was My Husband's Wife, I knocked
Yes.
that out in like, what, 3 hours on the
Right.
plane
That
on
was
the way
another
back from
really easy
Istanbul.
one that you're
So
like,
good.
it's so engaging. You're so good. And it's a
So
really
take her
good
recommendations,
respite.
people.
Yeah.
Yes.
But this one is horror, but it has like humor interwoven throughout of it, or throughout the story and throughout the characterizations, that makes it like, this is going to sound
Amusing?
silly with a horror book, but like charming
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
witty and
I
fun
like
to
it.
read. So this was a really good one. If you like horror, I highly recommend this one. If you like horror and that is your escape from the pit of despair, this is a good one to put on your list.
Love it.
What about you, Melissa?
So my recommendation this week is not a book. It is actually an act of kindness that I came across on social media. So are you familiar with Jen Hamilton?
She the nurse that's on TikTok?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So she is just an absolute gem of a human being. If you are unfamiliar with her, we will link her socials. But she is an L&D nurse, a labor and delivery nurse. And she's also a woman of faith, but she is the type of Christian who actually practices the teachings of Christianity. She has received a lot of backlash because of her discussions on Bible passages that perhaps other people did not agree with her interpretation of those passages. But girlfriend brings receipts, and I respect that. Jamie knows this. I am not a believer of any, I'm not a follower of any religion. I would be considered more of an atheist than anything else. But I have deep respect for people who follow a faith, but don't try to inflict that faith upon anyone else, and who really and truly embody that faith.
Actually follow that faith.
Yeah. And she actually follows that faith. And she's just beautiful light that shines. Like I said, I'm an energy worker, and her light immediately drew me in. Typically when it's a quote unquote Christian content creator, I kind of shy away from that, which is my own bias, but there it is. So anyway, long story there, introducing Jen Hamilton. But Jen Hamilton recently had an interaction on an airplane where she was traveling with her sister. I will link her Substack post about this, and you can catch it on her socials. And she heard a bit of a commotion where a family with a service animal was upset about sitting with a gentleman who had a seeing eye dog. So she offered to sit with that gentleman, switch seats. And one of the first thing that she said to him was, "My name is Jen. Can I sit with you?" And the gentleman's name is Ed Summers. And the dog's name is Loki, and he's a beautiful German Shepherd. And Jamie and I are both like massive dog people. So, anybody who loves a dog is like A-okay in my book. But Ed Summers is actually the head of accessibility at GitHub, which is a technology company. And he has actually since created an Instagram and TikTok, I think, to talk about his experiences with a disability, helps people understand what it means to be an advocate, and also answers questions about Loki, because who doesn't want to know about the dog?
I want to know about
Loki. The whole story was very uplifting, because a lot of times on social media, you'll see people behaving badly on aircraft, and that's posted often. This was a beautiful story where an absolute, again, gem of a human being decided to continue to be an absolute gem of a human being, and made an incredible friend. And one thing, this is, why I'm wearing this shirt. I'm going to back up. It says, "Can I sit with you?" So Jen, because just to back up again, Ed in one of his posts said one of the best things that Jen could have done was introduce herself. He can't see, he's blind. So she introduced herself and asked a question. Instead of saying, "I'm just going to sit with you," which is probably what I would have done in that situation, asking, to sit with him after introducing herself makes a huge difference. And so that's something that I've been turning around in my mind is just don't just assume that someone who you believe is in need of help wants your help. Ask. So that's something very interesting to me. But the reason that I'm wearing this shirt is because Jen and Ed teamed up to raise money for the Seeing Eye, which is the oldest guide dog school in the United States. Every dollar of merch that they make through April 30th will be donated to this organization. So please, if you are watching this, listening to this, check the show notes, go to her website. It's jenhamilton.co. And then I think there's like a merch link in there, but I'll have the full link there. This is a cute shirt. There's also a shirt with like little cartoons of dogs on there. Anything that you want, different colors, different sizes. It's just been one of the best things I've seen come out of the internet since I don't know, ever. So yeah, that's how I escaped from the pit this week.
I love that so much.
It's
And
my
I'm getting
favorite thing.
a shirt as soon as we wrap things up
Yay!
here.
That is
I love
awesome.
that. That's such a great story.
Yeah. So just to shut things down, this is going back to Caste. Please read the book. Please join in the discussion if you feel compelled to do so. Leave us comments, engage us on social media, send us an email, whatever you want. If you want to come on a follow-up episode to talk to us about it, we're definitely willing to have a conversation about that. Everything is not fine. We all know this, but at least shying away from that silence, that's the first step. That's the least we can do.
Because back to the old house analogy, if we ignore the fissures, they just get worse. They don't ever get better. And really, what we need to do, in my humble opinion, is demo the entire fucking building.
I do not
So,
disagree with that.
and
I'm digging that idea.
if the step to do that is to not shy away from the silence.
Yeah, I think yeah. And that's a wonderful note to close on. Thank you, Jamie. And there's a deep breath. Please do consider following us on whatever platform you get your podcasts on. We're on Apple, Spotify. We just launched on iHeart. We also are on YouTube. If you would like to watch video, we will also have video on Spotify. Follow us on social media on As the World Burns Pod on Instagram and Threads. Please engage with us. We're a teeny tiny little new podcast. And so we just want to hear from you. We want to know that what we're doing provides you value. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Until next time. Bye.